Right, I finally got it out. What should have been a 5-minute job turned into about an hour and a half. I got one spike and then back down again, and then nothing for ages. So I think the only thing that was wrong with it was the... Hi there guys, welcome to an episode. Now, if you watched the last video, you'll know that I bought another project. If you haven't already seen that video, then I suggest you go and look at it. I'll put a link up here for you. But basically, this is the Fiesta that I bought. Now, I left you with a bit of a cliffhanger last time where I said that it's the underneath that's going to decide whether I fix the car or if I scrap it and take the interior and put it in Alice. So we're going to start off now by going underneath the car. I've got it ready on the ramp to lift up, and I'm going to get you guys with me, take it up in the air, and we'll have a look underneath it. Right, I think we'll start from the front and work backwards. The underside of the grille looks to be alright, doesn't look to be anything. Took about 4 of us to get in the workshop, and that is that the left front brake is completely seized on, so I need to get the caliper apart and have a look at that. Right front brake is fine. It does look a bit like, right, we can see that the CV boot has got a little tiny hole in it, I think, so we need to get that off, replace the CV boots on there. Other than that, I mean, it looks rusty, it's been stood for ages, but the front end doesn't look too bad. This side looks to be alright. It looks like it's had a new ball joint on there at some point. The bushes in the arms there might be slightly worn out, maybe. Oh, right, there's something that I wasn't told about. That's not supposed to be like that. Right, got a bit of welding to do on that then. That is completely broken off of there, so that needs welding back up again. It's a good job I'm a welder, or I've been a welder. Looking along the floor pan, looks to be quite alright. I'm more looking at these structural areas here, because this is what they'll have a look at on the MOT. And it doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's got surface rust on it, but doesn't look to have anything more than just a bit of surface rust. Basically, along the front of the along the floor pan, it just looks like surface rust. The brake hoses look to be all right, to be honest. They don't look too bad. Obviously, this side is really, really rusty. Oh. All right, we got that one is slightly rusted on. I mean, like I say, surface rust, yes. Nothing worse than that at the moment. Let's have a look down the other side. Again, bit of surface rust, nothing that looks damaged in any way. I don't think the MOT are going to complain about it. Looking along the floor pan again, seems to be alright. There's no major damage, and it's kind of this area that they're going to be looking at. Be looking at things like that, and this area, chassis rails and things like that, but they all seem to be in pretty good condition. I know if this had been in England, it would have been a lot worse condition than what this is. So that looks alright. So we'll have a look down the sills, and they look to be alright. Oh, hang on. Oh, there, look. Right, got a little hole there and a little hole there. I'm not sure if it's... That doesn't feel too bad the rest of the way. So it needs a little patch there, but, you know, that's not bad. A little patch along there. The rest of the sill looks to be alright. Obviously, this hole we'd already seen from the car above, but there's another hole here, another hole here, so this is pretty soft, as you can see, so I can probably cut it. So I can probably cut it along here, weld in a new panel all the way along to there. So that, because it's basically the bottom of the wing. Now I don't really want to replace the entire wing, as the rest of it's not too bad, but that's pretty bad. So Yep, the bottom part of that needs replacing. Front wings look alright. Rear wheel arch is not fantastic, but it's not bad. It's a little tiny bit there, so it probably just needs... Could probably do with a piece of metal from there to somewhere about there, I would imagine. A little piece of there welding in. It's just a little tiny piece of metal, so that's not too bad. So the sills on this side, I'm looking about the same places as the other side. Oh, yeah, there's a little tiny hole there. So yeah, there's a little hole in that sill. Rest of it looks alright there. It has got stone chips, but they seem to be alright. That seems to be okay. And here's the bottom part where the other side was pretty bad, but that seems to be alright actually. That doesn't look too bad. Plenty of stone chips around here. Again, front wheel arches don't look too bad, the front wings, so I don't really want to replace them. So looking at this, this is the right rear wing. It's got a bit of surface rust here. This doesn't look too bad, but it probably wants a little plate on the outer wing there. So this probably wants a slightly bigger patch. It probably wants to go all the way along there, but it is really, it's about 2 centimeters of metal welded all the way along that edge. I would imagine that's a slight bit of surface rust that'll probably just rub out. So if I join the piece of metal along that edge there and weld it to this edge, I can nicely round it off, and then obviously I'll have to repaint that quarter panel. And we talked about the rear bumper here. I've talked to a couple of people, and this is a solid red colour, and that's clear coat. So somebody at some point has put clear coat on a solid red colour, probably not prepared the paint for it, and now the clear coat is actually coming off. So that bumper will need taking off, rubbing down and repainting. It's got some nice moss along the bottom there. Again, lacquer here, there and everywhere, but not too bad. A bit of a gouge there that filler will fix. So the bumper doesn't need replacing, it just needs fixing. It needs a coat of paint on it. The rest of the car, I think, looks alright. And yesterday, I bought a brand new battery for her. Batteries in Sweden aren't all that cheap, so this battery cost me almost as much as the car. It cost me about 65 quid. So I've almost doubled the price of the car immediately. So what I'm going to do now is see if it actually starts. So this is the first time I actually turn the key over. The good thing I can see is that the lights flashing there and the clocks come on, so there is power to it. Dash lights come on, and I heard the fuel pump start. Well, I was told it was a non-runner, and it is a non-runner. So what I'm going to do now is the thing that I've been told is wrong with it, and that's the coil. So I'm going to look around to see if I've got another coil. I think I've got a couple from Alice. If I have, then I'll fit that coil and see if it'll start. I didn't have a coil the same as the one that's fitted. The one that's fitted to this car is the older type with this kind of plug on the end of it. And the one that I've got is the new type with just the straight pegs on it. So the coil that I've got doesn't fit the leads. But I've got a set of leads and I have got a coil. So what I've then done is I've extended the wires from this coil down to the plug down there, because the leads I've got are way too short for this engine. So I'm now going to plug these onto the right spark plug and see if it starts then. No, doesn't. I now need to see if I've got things like compression and a spark. I've checked the 12 volt feed to the coil, which I have, and now I've put a timing light on one of the cables, so we'll see if it flashes. No, it doesn't. With it being a fairly modern engine, I can connect this up to a computer, which I've done. I know that I've got 12 volt to the coil, but I can't get a spark out of the coil. So the thing that tells the coil when to spark is the crankshaft sensor. Now, without being able to test it, the only way I can see if the crank sensor is actually working is to check what's coming out of it. Now, the crank sensor will tell me what the RPM is doing on the engine. So with it in graph mode like this, I can then have a look at the RPMs as I crank the engine. So what we can see there is the max RPM of the engine was 334 RPMs, and we can see that there's quite a gap in between every sensor here. There was nothing for ages. Nothing happened for quite a while, then it kind of spiked and it went down a bit, and then there was nothing for a while. I got one spike and then back down again, and then nothing for ages. So I think that the crank sensor might be knackered. Now, I was playing around with the crank sensor a couple of days ago, and I was pulling the plug on and off, and I was trying to get the crank sensor out to actually have a look at it. Put it back on again, and the car started. It didn't start very well. It did start. If I tried to accelerate, it kind of died. I could get it to start with a bit of a higher revs, and then it just dies all the time. I've come back to it a few days later, just won't start again. Now, the crank sensor, I can't get out either. It seems to be stuck in the block. So I've been and bought a new crank sensor. I've also bought a new set of plugs. A new crank sensor was about 30 quid. And I've also bought a set of 4 plugs. The plugs that are in the car at the moment are the original ones that were there, plus a couple that I had lying around. I've cleaned them up. They're probably not fantastic. These cost me about £10 for the 4. So I'm going to put in 4 new plugs, and I'm going to have to try and get the crank sensor out somehow, and I think I'm going to have to be pretty violent to get it out. Right, so there's the crank sensor, and it's pretty stuck in there. I have been trying to get it out already. I've broken the little lug off of here, and I've tried to get it out, and it's just rusted in there, stuck. So I have to get it out somehow. Normally they just pull out, but that one isn't. So what I need to do now is heat up this area here and expand that slightly to be able to get this out. Right, I finally got it out. What should have been a 5-minute job turned into about an hour and a half. I had to totally destroy it to get it out of there. It doesn't really matter because I bought a new one anyway, but that was a pain in the neck. So we'll get back down on the ground and we'll change some plugs, and hopefully she will start. She runs! Crank sensor was the problem all along. Now I'm going to try and put the old coil back on again and see if that coil works, and hopefully it was just the crank sensor and nothing else. Got the original leads back on again and the original coil plugged back in again. Now hopefully this starts. If it starts now, then all that was wrong with it was the crank sensor. If it doesn't start now, I'll probably have to replace the coil. Fingers crossed. That sweet sound meant that it starts. The only thing that was wrong with it was the crank sensor. So now I know that the engine actually runs. The only thing that was wrong with it was the crank sensor, possibly the plugs, but they're changed anyway. So now I have to make a bit of a decision, and I need your help really. So far, the amount of money that I've spent on it, there's about £80 for the car, about £70 for the battery. Crank sensor and plugs cost me about another 50 quid, something like that. So that's what I'm in to the car at the moment. So it doesn't have an MOT yet, so it's got to have an MOT, which is going to cost me around about 50 quid. Do you think I can make a profit out of this car? Let me know, put a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you all. And we'll continue this in the next video. So I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.